Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in to my channel. I do appreciate it. Please consider hitting that button, which means subscribe. I don't know if you're supposed to say subscribe. I heard somebody say somewhere that you're not supposed to actually ask for that. Okay, so I'm trying to aid in my own learning with regard to antennas. And I learned through someone's comment here on the internet that the plural form of antenna is not antennas. But that's okay, because everybody seems to spell it and use it that way. Okay, so no credit for this video goes to me, other than the fact that I am reading it, but I found this glossary online simply by typing in antenna glossary, and it removes a lot of effort, as I was going to create my own glossary for terms I had come across in a previous video, but somebody has already done it for me, and all I have to do is read it. I do make this video for me because I'll probably watch it over and again just to... Okay, here we go. Starting the glossary. Paul Larson Antennas. Antenna glossary. Adaptive smart antenna. An antenna system having circuit elements associated with its radiating elements such that one or more of the antenna properties are controlled by the received signal. Antenna. A metallic device used in the transmission and reception of electromagnetic waves. An antenna is a passive or an active device which permits transmission. Antenna diversity. The use of two or more antennas to improve signal quality. Antenna power gain. The ratio of the antenna's maximum radiation intensity in a stated direction to the maximum radiation intensity of a reference antenna, dipole isotropic antenna, with identical power applied to both. Attenuation. The loss in power of electromagnetic signals between transmission and reception points. Azimuth. Horizontal direction expressed as the angular distance between the direction of a fixed point, as the observer's heading, and the direction of the object. Bandwidth. A range of consecutive frequencies comprised of a band, i.e., the cellular bandwidth is 72 MHz wide between the frequencies of 824 MHz to 890 MHz, over which an antenna shall perform without the need of any adjustment. Base station. In a cellular communication system, a base station could be considered a central mode of transmission and reception for the network. The station includes an omnidirectional antenna or several sectorial antennas. Beam width. The angle of signal coverage provided by an antenna. Beam width usually decreases as antenna gain increases. Cable assembly. A cable that is ready for installation in specific applications and usually terminated with connectors. Cable loss. A numeric value describing the amount of signal loss from one point on a length of cable to another. This is measured in decibels. Center conductor. A solid or stranded electrical conductor, generally composed of copper and located at the center of the coaxial cable. Center fed. Transmission line connection at the electrical center of an antenna radiator. Coaxial cable. Cable consisting of a single copper conductor in the center surrounded by a plastic layer for insulation and a braided metal outer shield. Coax is used to transfer radio frequency energy from the transmitter to the antenna. Next page. Collinear array. A system of two or more antenna radiators arranged in a line and connected end to generate a directed field pattern. Serial linear topology. Conductor. A metal body such as tubing, rod, or wire which permits current to travel continuously along its length. Coupler. Referring to on-glass antennas, a coupler is the two-piece interface between the coaxial cable on the inside of the glass and the radiator on the outside of the vehicle. It is designed to efficiently couple RF energy through the glass. The formulation of the glass and glass thickness normally have a substantial effect on coupler performance. Current loop. A point of current maxima antinode on an antenna. Current node. A point of current minima on an antenna. Decibel. Decibel. The standard unit used to express transmission gain or loss and relative power levels. See basic antenna concepts. dBd. Quantification of the gain for an antenna in comparison with the gain of a dipole. dBi. The dB power relative to an isotropic source. dBm. A measure of power based upon the decibel scale, but referenced to the milliwatt, i.e. 1 dBm equals 0.001 watt. dBm is often used to describe absolute power level where the point of reference is 1 milliwatt. In high power applications, the dBW is often used with a reference of 1 watt. dBW. The ratio of the power to 1 watt expressed in decibels. DC ground. An antenna which is a dead short to a DC current and has a shunt-fed design. To RF, it is not seen as a short. Dipole. An antenna, usually a half wavelength long, split at the exact center for connection to a feed line, also called a doublet. Directional antenna. An antenna having the property of radiating or receiving electromagnetic waves more effectively in some directions than others. Directivity. The theoretical characteristic of an antenna to concentrate power in only one direction, whether transmitting or receiving. Driven element. a radiator element of an antenna system to which the transmission line is connected. Efficiency, the ratio of useful output to input power, determined in antenna systems by losses in the system, including losses in nearby objects. Next page, electrically small antenna. Some antennas, such as various low-profile antennas, some base-loaded whips, and often rubber ducky portable antennas, are physically considerably smaller than either a half or quarter wavelength antenna. The challenge with electrically small antennas is to maintain radiating efficiency. A greater challenge is to design an antenna with adequate bandwidth. Careful design using high-quality materials often overcome these obstacles. Elevated feed raises the radiating element above the vehicle roof level, reducing obstruction. Elements, typically a subset or a more elementary part of a larger antenna system. For example, an element of a Yagi-Uda array is normally a dipole antenna that, together with other dipoles, forms the array. An 8-element Yagi antenna would then ordinarily have 8 dipoles. Embedded antennas. Antennas directly integrated into a system such as an access point, a terminal, or a handset. In most cases, this antenna is matched to the system and cannot be used in other applications without modification. E-plane and H-plane. And antenna measurements in general and radiation patterns in particular must be performed with polarization in mind. Since polarization is defined as having the same orientation as an antenna's electric field vector, it is common practice to refer to measurements aligned with either the electric vector, E-plane, or magnetic vector, H-plane. Field strength, an absolute measure in one direction of the electromagnetic wave field generated by an antenna at some distance away from the antenna. Field tunable. Antennas identified as field tunable are shipped with a cut chart the installer uses to select a desired operating frequency by tuning the antenna to resonance. Cut charts should be used as guidelines and are adequately accurate for many applications. However, Larson recommends using appropriate RF measurement devices whenever possible for more accurate tuning. Frequency, the number of cycles per second of a sound wave. Front to back ratio, the gain of an antenna in a specified direction. Gain, the increase in signal strength that is produced by an amplifier. The ratio between the amount of energy propagated from an antenna that is directional compared to the energy from the same antenna that would be propagated if the antenna were not directional. The gain of an antenna is the same regardless of if the antenna is used to transmit or receive. Gigahertz, 1 billion cycles per second. GPS, Global Positioning System, is a radio navigation system allowing land, sea, and airborne users to determine the exact location, velocity, and time 24 hours a day in all weather conditions anywhere in the world. Ground plane, a man-made system of conductors placed below an antenna to serve as an earth ground. Next page. Half-wave dipole antenna, a center-fed antenna whose electrical length is half the wavelength of the transmitter or received signal. An antenna consisting of two rods, quarter wavelength each, in a straight line that radiates electromagnetic energy. Helical antenna, an antenna with a spiral conductor wound around a cross section, an antenna that has the form of a helix. Hertz, HZ, that's Canadian, Z. Hertz, a unit of frequency equal to 1 cycle per second. Hot spot, not private but a public area where wireless LAN internet access is apt to be used for high-speed access to email, websites, etc. Users are usually unproductive while waiting. Examples are convention centers, hotels, airports, train stations, bus stations, restaurants, and coffee shops. H-plane, antenna measurements in general and radiation patterns in particular must be performed with polarization in mind. Since polarization is defined as having the same orientation as an antenna's electric field vector, it is common practice to refer to measurements aligned with either the electric vector, E-plane, or magnetic vector, H-plane. Impedance, the ohmic value of an antenna feed point, matching section or transmission line at a radio frequency. An impedance may contain a reactance as well as a resistance component. Megahertz, MHZ, 1 million cycles per second. Top of this page. Mobile antenna refers to any antenna mounted on a vehicle, includes a radiating element and a mechanism to fix the antenna to the vehicle. Monopole, literally one pole, such as a vertical radiator, operated against the earth or a ground plane. A handheld rubber duck type of antenna will most likely be a monopole. Mount. A mount is the device onto which a mobile antenna attaches. It is the mechanical and electrical interface between an antenna and the vehicle. That's a little bit too intense of a definition. Multipath propagation, the result of interference from reflections off surfaces surrounding the antenna. This interference changes the target's return signal strength. Sometimes it is stronger and sometimes weaker than expected. The degree of multipath propagation depends on the type of reflective surface. Flat metal, towers, and buildings cause the strongest effects. NMO. Perhaps the most prolific of all mobile antenna mounts is the NMO. It enables one mount inserted in a drilled hole in the vehicle body to be used over the lifetime of the vehicle with many screw-on antennas. Noise. Any unwanted and unmodulated energy that is always present to some extent within any signal. Omnidirectional. An antenna providing a 360-degree transmission pattern. This type of antenna is used when This type of antenna is used when coverage in all directions is required. Next page. PCB. Printed circuit board. Pentaband antenna. An antenna that combines 4-band GSM and WCDMA 2100 to receive and transmit signals in all cellular bands. These antennas can be used in mobile, machine-to-machine, laptop, automotive, and all portable device applications for devices operating on GSM bands, GSM 850, and there's a list that I won't read. They meet the need for small, high-efficiency, all-cellular band antennas. Planar array. An antenna in which all of the elements, both active and parasitic, are in one plane. Plenum rated. Plenum rated. A term used to describe Ethernet cable that has slow burning, fire-resistant casing which emits little smoke. Plenum rated Ethernet cable is used in overhead duct work. Point-to-point. A long-range wireless network between 2 points. Point-to-point wireless networks use directional antennas. Point-to-multipoint. A communications channel running from one point to several other points. Polarization. The sense of the wave radiated by an antenna. This can be horizontal, vertical, elliptical, or circular, left or right hand circularity, depending on the design and application. Printed antenna. Printed antenna. All antennas made by means of a printed process. Top of the page. Quarter wave antenna. An antenna with an electrical length that is equal to 1/4 wavelength of the signal being transmitter or received. I don't think I'm reading that wrong. I think it's just not written well. And okay, so quarter wave antenna. An antenna with an electrical length that is equal to 1/4 wavelength of the signal being transmitted or received. Transmitted or received. A half-wave antenna cut in half with one end grounded. Radiation pattern. The geographical representation of the relative field strength radiated from an antenna in a given plane, plotted against the angular distance from a given reference. Radiator. a discrete conductor radiating RF energy in an antenna system. Radome. R-A-D-O-M-E. First time I've heard of this. A typically rigid dielectric cover over the radiating portion of an antenna, and nearly always separated from the radiator by an air gap. A radome, the merger of radar and dome. A radome has the purpose of protecting the radiator from natural weather phenomena and contamination by dirt. It usually includes aerodynamic shaping to minimize wind loading. Receiver, RX. An electronic device which enables a particular signal to be separated from all and converts the signal format into a format for video, voice, or data. Relative antenna power gain. The ratio of the average radiation intensity of the test antenna to the average radiation of a reference antenna with all other conditions remaining equal. Repeater. A physical device that passes signals from one transmission medium to another without alteration. ROHS. This is the next page. ROHS. The ROHS directive stands for the restriction of the use of certain hazardous substances in electrical and electronic equipment. This directive will ban the placing on the EU market of new electrical and electronic equipment containing more than agreed levels of lead, cadmium, mercury, hexavalent chromium, polybrominated biphenyl, PBB, and polybrominated diphenyl ether, PBDE, flame retardants from the 1st of July 2006. Shield effectiveness. A measure of how well the shielding material, braid, solid tape, etc., protects the external environment from radiation produced by the center conductor. Standard impedance. The nominal impedance associated with the transmission line and test equipment. Standing wave ratio, SWR. See VSWR. Transmission line. The connecting link allowing the radio frequency energy generated by the radio to be delivered to the antenna. Transmitter. An electronic device consisting of oscillator, modulator, and other circuits which produce a radio electromagnetic wave signal for radiation into the atmosphere by an antenna. Voltage standing wave ratio, VSWR. VSWR of the antenna is the ratio of the maximum to minimum values of voltage in the standing wave pattern appearing along a lossless 50 ohm transmission lines with an antenna as the load. Top of the page toward the right. Wavelength. See basic antenna concepts. Whip. 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 The vertical portion of the antenna assembly acting as the radiator of the radio frequency energy. Last definition on the list, Yagi. A directional gain antenna utilizing one or more parasitic elements, named after one of the Japanese inventors, Yagi and Uda. Well, thank you very much for listening. I hope that's been helpful to you, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.